we're going to talk about some pretty strong forces that are driving ESG forward in the marketplace. Just recently, last week, there was the SEC proposed disclosure rule. So that's one of these drivers that you're going to talk about. And Barry, when we look at adoption in the marketplace, be it a technology, be it a new service line, we can reference the Hemingway quote that things happen gradually, then suddenly. And it does feel like these big forces right now are all adding up. In 2020, there's going to be a lot going on in ESG, and I know you are one of the leaders here in the world on what's happening with ESG. So why don't you take the audience through what's going on?
Yeah, and maybe the most important first point is just Erik just mentioned SEC, and if you don't touch SEC, please don't tune this out, because it is much deeper and wider than ultimately just public companies in the United States. And let me just sort of paint that picture for you. The three bullets on the right of this screen really talk about key drivers. You can think of them as really fundamental events. Now, we've been talking about this was coming for a long time. We go back to the quote, but there is sort of a convergence of elements here. First off, in November, there was an announcement of the formation of a new international standards board to set standards. So as accountants, standards in our sort of space, that is just sort of right into our sweet spot, right? A lot of the work that we do as a profession is on the basis of standards. It's on the basis of compliance and reporting and the like. And that is now coming to fruition. And I won't walk you through all of the minutiae of how that's all coming together and mergers of a bunch of organizations. But what the substantive point is that there was a multitude of different measurements and standards and all of those types of things. And there will be an international sustainability board. It's been announced as people. It's being, it's really hitting the ground. It really becomes into fruition shortly. There will be standards that will be exposed. There's going to be adoption of some of the existing standards that's been in the marketplace. And that's very important, because the rules that come out of this through regulation, as Erik mentioned, the SEC rule, they're going to have further reach than just the entity itself. There's going to be, for instance, in the emissions area, level 3 emissions, it's so called, which really digs into the supply chain and the accumulation of information. It can be very small businesses that are going to be providing information up channel or down channel in the supply chain, and that are going to be part of this process. But then maybe the most important part is this really is about market forces. Yes, there's political debate and certainly political disagreement on these issues, and maybe people will challenge the SEC rule, and it certainly will change from its exposure. But the market forces are very, very strong. And in fact, to a large degree, the market forces in the US are catching up to the rest of the world as far as what's expected from investor perspective, multi-stakeholders. And it's not just investors. It's not just investors in a capital market system. It's also lenders who are looking at how do we sort of allocate our resources from a lending perspective? Do we look at companies that embrace or at least report on ESG, which could be private companies? The private equity space is big time and sort of setting expectations of what private companies do in this particular space. And it will continue to evolve. No one can predict with certainty is exactly how it's going to look. But I think it's a very important notion to think about it in the context of what's the sweet spot of the profession. Our role in this space is sort of ours to lose. Believe me, there's a lot of people outside the profession that want to have key roles in this developing and multi-trillion-dollar space that's going to occur. But when you think about the combination of our members, CPAs being in CFO roles, and then outside firms, what you're really talking about here is a system of quality control or internal controls that generates this information inside of a business. It's about the gathering of that information in accordance with those controls. It's about reporting on it internally and telling a story internally. Ultimately, it's about reporting externally, depending on the company, maybe externally to the lead in a supply chain or in a regulatory environment, and then ultimately assurance over that space. And we have been talking about this explosion of what's called business information, not just financial information. And the future of the profession and the growth of the profession and the importance of the profession in this broader footprint of business information is really playing out in this space. Initially, it's going to be the flagship. It'll be in the environmental or the natural capital area, but it's going to grow into social and governance and employee information, et cetera. And this is the movement of what business information is about. And you can think back 100 years, and it was about the demand for good, solid financial information. Today, it's market-driven forces in a lot of ways, followed by regulation of broader business information flows, not just financial flows. And as I said, those 5 elements are our sweet spot. No one's guaranteeing our profession's role in this. It's about our profession seizing this opportunity, and it's about our profession delivering on its quality and its trusted advisor role in what the market is really demanding.
Well, Barry, it's a live show. There's questions coming in. One of the questions was this an overreach by the SEC? We're going to have future sessions on this. We're not going to clear this more detailed slide today. There's a 60-day comment period. A lot of people are encouraging companies and firms to respond. So just we got to keep moving, but just a comment on that question.
Well, a really quick comment on that is it could be. Time will tell, and responders will tell, and the government will decide, and maybe the courts. That's all potentially true. But what I would encourage people, and what I say to our members is, whether it is or not becomes somewhat of a judgment call or political, or your political opinion even. But I would encourage you put that to the side and really think about this broader notion of business information, even if it evolves, even if it is an overreach and it becomes narrower. The market forces for this information to flow is a very important place for our profession to be connected.
Thanks, Barry. And one thing that I wake up and think about every day are all the technology companies that are helping transform the practice of accounting. And in the ESG category, there's 1,800 startups right now. They're not all focused on the profession, but there's a lot of innovation occurring. And one way we're going to help, get our arms around how to support, in particular, the mid-tier businesses, because as you said, the scope 3, this is going to have tentacles into smaller businesses, not just the public market, is through solutions. And one program we have is the Startup Accelerator, and we actually put together a special cohort of ESG companies. You see these on the right, and we're learning from them. You learn from the suppliers. We learn from the marketplace. So just a lot happening here, and we're going to be talking about the standards evolution. We're going to be talking about the regulation evolution, and we'll be talking about solutions as